Okay, Barbara, we are live.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. We're very excited to be talking to Ryan Steck about Fields of Fire, which is his first book, and we're not quite in publication week, and we're sorry Brian isn't actually here, but we're going to meet Marine Raider Matthew Red. And with us is Connor Sullivan, author of, well, hold up your book, Connor. So both books in
author of Sleeping Bear, which came out in, I think it was July 2021. And then Wolf Trap is the next one coming out March 14th of 2023.
And we're arranging for Connor and his dad, Mark Sullivan, to come down here and talk to us about Wolf Trap because we Zoomed with Connor for Sleeping Bear, which just won. Which award was it at VoucherCon, Connor?
The Barry Award.
Right. So best first novel or best thriller?
Best first novel. Yep.
Anyway, so exciting to win an award for your first book. Ryan, I hope that you will be equally blessed, but you're going to have to wait till next year, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And in a little while, we have another guest coming. Guess who? CJ Boggs, whose book we're launching this evening, as a matter of fact, is 7:00. He's in our other back room. I'm in one, signing hundreds of copies for you, which is very exciting, but he's going to pop in here and talk to Ryan. Ryan, why is it that you have this extensive acquaintance amongst so many writers? You do some really good work.
Yeah, well, listen, when I'm not writing books, I'm covering them as the Real Book Spy. And I've been doing that for about a decade. That's how I know Connor, by the way. I've had the pleasure of covering Connor and Chuck. CJ Boggs is he's my favorite living author. I've made no secret about that. I love Vince Flynn and Chuck and Brad Thor, and big fan of Connor. So I've been covering the industry and the genre, mostly thrillers, but also mysteries for like a decade as a book spy.
And do you think you learned anything which you were able to apply to your?
Yeah, I think I learned a couple of things. Yeah, the hardest thing of all, I knew I wanted to write a book. It was hard to figure out what I could write that wouldn't be super comparable to anything else I'd covered. I didn't want readers to pick this up and go, hey, so you got that idea from so-and-so. And actually, no one was doing quite what Fields of Fire is until Connor did Sleeping Bear. They're pretty similar. And then there was I remember Jack Carr did a book in Montana, and I was literally on the phone with him, and he was asking me about my debut, and I was like, it's set in Montana. No one's done that. And I said, what's your next book about? And he's like, you're not going to like it, but it's in Montana. And I thought he was kidding. And that was Savage Son. It's really in Montana. So it's been fun. And I love covering these guys and reading their books, but it's been a whole new adventure being on the other end of it.
I can well imagine. Well, speaking of Montana, Treasure State, in fact, is a double entendre title referring to Montana and also to a treasure hunt that takes place in this book. And I don't have it with me, but in fact, Walt Longmire and Helen Beck, sorry. It's also in Montana. So there's some magical thing about Montana and thrillers at the moment. I forgot to say that Patrick will put a buy link for Fields of Fire and Treasure State into the comments field, and he'll be monitoring them. So if you have any questions or comments that you would like to make, go ahead and type them in, and we'll circle back to them after a little while. So Connor, I think you've actually read this book, haven't you?
I have. I got to read it. I think it was it October, November of last year. So yeah, I definitely had the pleasure. It was just a PDF at that point, but I was able to see the physical copy in my local Barnes and Noble and at VoucherCon a couple weeks ago. So that was pretty cool.
Great. So why don't I, because people would be much more interested in hearing you talk to Ryan than me. So why don't you plunge in there and ask him some questions?
Cool. Well, Ryan, again, congrats, man. And this is a huge accomplishment. Your debut. I know it didn't really work out like you wanted to, getting COVID, not going to VoucherCon, but you know, man, you knocked it out of the park with this debut.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much.
It was congrats.
I appreciate it. Getting COVID, the only positive was I had COVID in January and I've had no smell or taste since. And then I got COVID on pub day and I got my smell and taste back. So it was like,
really?
it was like a little victory. I have no idea how that works, but I'll take it. And you read this before. I don't think I sent it to anyone else. I knew that you knew Montana so well, and I'm such a fan of your stuff. Dude, I was so nervous waiting to hear back from you on it. I really was.
Well, I was actually like, when you sent me that and I read kind of like where it took place, it literally takes place in my hometown and right around the place I grew up all around. So I was like, oh no, like this could either be very good or an absolute train wreck. And I was so glad it was amazing. So
You wouldn't be here if it were a real train wreck, would you?
I guess not. No, but I was actually very surprised how he was able to describe scenery and kind of the local culture of, a place that, before all the TV shows that have come out in the last couple of years, Chuck's TV show, Sheridan's TV show, this wasn't really, this area that we grew up in, wasn't really put in literature that much. And just see what Ryan did, put his own spin on it and really just encapsulate, what the culture is. It was really cool to see. So Ryan, do you want to talk about kind of the research that you did? I know that you told me that you haven't been to Montana.
Yeah, I couldn't get out there because of COVID.
Yeah. And that's kind of when I wrote Sleeping Bear, I had to do everything on Google Maps, talking to people that lived there. I was unable to afford going up to Alaska at that time. So yeah, do you want to just tell the audience how you did your research?
Yeah, I got lucky because I knew someone that had just moved there. And I asked 1,000 questions. Like they probably just what they wanted. They just started like setting up shop in Montana and they have like this list of stuff from me. And then another friend of mine actually went out there and did significant research for me because they were a lot closer. They could get up there during COVID when I couldn't. Beyond that, dude, it's a lot of same like of what you did. I was online all the time looking at, it's crazy how far we've come. Like Google Maps has like Street View now. Like you can see stuff. And then there's like webcams that people have up. So you get a really good sense of the landscape and the land itself and just the territory. And I really tried hard to take what I was seeing and run it past people who live there or have spent a lot of time there and make sure that it was working. I'll tell you what's funny. So Chuck offered to read it. And I don't think he really knows this. So we sent it to him. I've never been more nervous in my life. He's like my idol. Like I was like, if he hates this book, I'm going to die. And we didn't hear anything for a while. I knew we wouldn't because he told me he was busy. He was going up on the set of Big Sky and he was writing. And when he sent the blurb and he sent it to my publisher, so I didn't even know. And I was like on pins and needles, man. And I got a call from my editor who said, "Hey, Ryan, big congrats on that blurb from Chuck. That's huge." And I was like, what blurb? Like, I haven't seen it. And so they sent it to me and where, he sort of mentioned the authenticity in it. That meant everything to me, That was huge for me.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I got to meet Chuck for the first time at Thriller Fest this year, and he's such a good guy. So it'll be fun for him to come on in a little bit. Well, let's talk about your protagonist, Matty Red. I know the story behind him, and I've heard you talk about him a lot. Do you want to kind of give the overall of how this character started? Because it's a great story, and just how he ended up years later in Fields of Fire.
Yeah, so I created him in 10th grade in a creative writing assignment. We had this really bold and unafraid intern named Shay, and I'm really close with her today. I love her to death. She came in, and I was the troublemaker in school. I didn't take it real seriously, at least not in 10th grade. And she gave us this assignment, and she said, I'll never forget it. She came in and like no one wanted to do it. And she goes, all right, you can have swearing, violence, whatever you want, write about anything you want. And like any 15-year-old kid, I went home and took that way too far. But I found while I was doing it that I was becoming very serious about it. Like things that we work on now, like showing versus telling and setting your scene and developing your characters, I was doing in this short story about this teenage vigilante named Matty Red, who was defending his school against an attack. Turned it in, felt great, felt like I crushed it. And the next day got called down to the principal's office, and the superintendent was there, the principal, vice principal, and then both my parents. And they suspended me for a week because it was so violent. Before that, I didn't know it was a peer-to-peer project. So this poor kid, if you're watching, because I shared this on Facebook, his name was Trenton Hearn, and he had to read Maddie Read, a short story by Ryan Steck, out loud. And he kept stopping and looking to our teacher like, should I keep going? And they let him go. My parents at the time, their approach on this was like, he did the assignment. Like, he might have went overboard and it was violent and stuff, but he did what you wanted. And so I got to go home. I had like the parents that were like, you get in trouble at school, you're in trouble at home. I had a week off school and they let me do whatever I wanted. So the joke that I like to say is Maddie Read got me a week off school and a book deal, is how that worked out. Yeah. In my adult life, I'm married. I have 6 kids and I knew I wanted to write. I was sitting around thinking, what can I write that you guys aren't already doing, man? You know, I'm competing with ideas that everyone else has. And I'm like, I got to come up with something before they do. And I thought, we never see Mitch Rapp out west. And everyone knows I love CJ Box. I love Joe Pickett. And I was like, I'm going to have to explore out there with a character that's a little bit more Vince Flynn-like. And I didn't know if it'd work. And I thought back to Red, who I created all those years ago. And I really wondered, now that I'm in a different place in my life, I wonder where he would be. And that's sort of where it came from. And I just sat down and started writing.
That's awesome. Well, it looks like someone has jumped into the Zoom. Can you see Ryan?
Yeah, dude, you should feel my heart right the second I seen Chuck sit down. He's no, Chuck's definitely my idol. I'm such a big fan of his stuff. Treasure State is my favorite non-Joe Pickett book, by the way. So I can't wait for readers to get that.
Hey, Ryan. Hi, Connor. Hey, Ryan, congratulations on this.
Thank you.
It seems like it was forever since I read The Galley, but I know how that goes. I mean, but well done.
Thank you so much.
So I want to ask now, so you work a lot as an editor. You obviously work as the Real Book Spy. What has been something that has surprised you in the process? Let's start with the writing process, and then something that surprised you in the publishing process that you didn't necessarily know until you became a published writer.
So it is infinitely easier being on the editing side, the editor side, than the author side. I've worked with writers and have been like what I would probably deem now as ruthless when I send back editorial notes. And when I went through editing with my editor, my first thought, honestly, when I got it, I was like, I'm good. I should be nicer to people when I send editorial letters back. This sucks. Like, you go through that initial fear. I'd never been through it as a writer. And it was like, I'm looking at the amount of red ink and I was like, she just dipped the whole thing in red ink. Like, I'm gonna have to rewrite the whole book. And then you realize it's not as bad as you think. And, you know, you got to just trust them and work through a lot of these things. And then you start seeing how much better it's making the book. And that's when you buy in, I think. And I was all in. Same thing on the publishing side. So as a book spy, I've never thought anything of it judging everyone else's work. It is like completely stressful putting yourself out there as the writer. I've never understood when I read stuff as a book spy and people come back and are like, I'm so glad you liked it. I'm like, I don't know why, you know, I mean, that's so nice of you to say. Thank you very much. On the other end of it, when you send this thing out, even just for blurbs, I was sweating bullets, man. It's so much harder being the author.
Yeah, it really is, especially when you just send it out and you have to have those like weeks of that uncertainty. It's just, you know, restless, like not being able to sleep, but it is nice when you finally get those first couple coming in. Chuck,
other than my wife being in labor with our last kid lasted like 3.5 days and got pretty dicey. I swear to you, other than that, the most nervous I've been in my life was when Chuck was reading it. Just waiting. I was like, man, if he hates it, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I was so nervous.
I wasn't worried at all. I didn't, you know, one thing I have just a question, because everybody's, you know, kind of pathway is a little bit different than everyone else's. You know, you are the only author I know who almost had a built-in support network for book one because of what you do. And I'm wondering, I know it's you may not have that perspective as some others, but I wonder how much maybe your editor or publishers think that has helped launch the first book, with so many big name authors saying, you know, tweeting, reporting blurbs. Those are the hard things.
Yeah, it was nice because So the year before I signed a book deal, the Real Book Spy had 2 million unique visitors. So we felt like I knew a lot of readers. It allowed me to kind of go and try and explore different things. My agent, you know how agents are. I remember my agent, we were talking about who do you want to get to blurb? Who do you think will support you? And you know, he's like, of course, he's like, we're going to find out who's a liar and who's not. You know, let's see who really comes through. And there was a lot of joking about it. But yeah, I think what was really nice is, I mean, I know how publishers work, and when they put together these plans and all that, with Tyndale, they were very much, they allowed me to be part of the conversation. It wasn't just, here's your marketing plan. It was, Ryan, what do you think? And what would you like to do? And do you have thoughts? And they really included me on that. And I really enjoyed that process because, yeah, there's been like a million times in my head when I'm covering everyone else's books that I would think, you know, if I ever put a book out, I'd want to do this, or I'd want to do that, or I'd want to get it to so-and-so. And so it was nice that they included me in that planning.
Very cool.
Yeah. And I think we were all just excited to help you out just because you've helped us out. You've helped like so many of us out for so long. And it was just, again, it was just also a great thing that your book was great. You know, it would have been one thing. It would have been like, ooh, you know,
so Kyle Mills sent me a note. So that's the other thing is I didn't want to ask for favors. I really wanted to earn it. Like that was important to me. And if I didn't, then I didn't. But I remember Kyle Mills read it and I'm good friends with him. And the email I got back was like, you have no idea how happy I am that this didn't suck, because it's so rough when you read like a manuscript from a friend and it's bad and you don't know what to say. And he was like, I'm just so happy this book doesn't suck. Like, big congrats. And he sent me a very sweet blurb. So it's been unique in that regard for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Again, we're all happy for you. We're proud of you. This is a really tough business, and to see this first book succeed and is amazing. So you do have a second one. You're finished with it, and that's coming out when? Do you have a title yet?
Yeah, so the title just changed, and I got the final cover today. So originally I was calling it Killing Ground, and they felt like that didn't test well. And they said, you know, hey, what's your backup title? Which I found out you need a backup title. Didn't have one. And I remember when Fields of Fire was going out to publishers, like the week before, my agent hated Fields of Fire and was like, we need a different title. So I was like, all right. So he's like, just write down 50. And I was like, 50? I don't have two. Like, so he's like, just take the weekend. So I wrote down even bad stuff. And he would call me with suggestions. He's like, hey, what about Montana Blood? And I'm like, I like when Greg Iles did Mississippi Blood, you know, and I would push back. And there was one time I thought he was joking. He threw out a title like the Apex Solution. And I was like, I don't even know what that means. You know, that's not. And so the night before I was so stressed and he goes, Ryan, we got to have a title. And I was like, John, I don't Fields of Fire. And he goes, I love that. Let's use that. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. That's for the, and he just acted like he didn't even know that was always the title. So with book 2, they gave me a few days to think about it. And I came back and I pitched them Lethal Range, and they really liked that and slapped it on the cover, and it really worked. And I'm not showing the cover till probably next week, but I'm really happy with it. I think it looks really good.
Awesome. Good. And Chuck, do you choose your titles? Does your publishing house choose your titles? How do you do that?
It's a mutual process. I usually start out with a working title, and then you know, I run that by my editor plus the, you know, kind of the gist of the book. And for, you know, and my working title has become the title probably 80% of the time. Oh, wow. But there have been those that for, you know, really good reasons. They said, oh, geez, I'm not, you know, sometimes it's so near another book that's coming out at the same time by the same publisher that I don't know anything about, that we make a change, or in some cases, they think it's obscure. For example, this new book, Treasure State, my original title was Anaconda, because that's where it takes place, Anaconda, Montana. Cool. Yeah. But all the editors and all their focus groups all said, it sounds so snaky. And so they didn't like it. So then we came up with Treasure State.
Very cool. Anaconda, I was just up there a couple weeks ago.
It's an interesting location, isn't it?
It is. in the smokestack, I think is the highest brick made structure in the United States.
Yes, it plays a big role in the.
Oh, it does. Oh, cool. Well,
Yeah.
I'm excited to read it. Are you coming through Montana for your book tour, or?
I'm going to come to Bozeman. Yeah, my book tour is all over the map. I go from Paramus, New Jersey, to an event with Harlan Coben to Bozeman the next day.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
To the country bookshelf, and
Yep.
I'm looking forward to that.
What do you know what day that's going to be? I might be in town.
I think it's Saturday or Sunday. I'm sorry,
Okay.
I don't have that right in front of me.
I might be on our ranch with Bo. But if I'm in town, I will go.
If
Do you
I
feel
hope
like-
you can, it'd be great to see you.
Yeah.
Chuck, do you feel like a professional athlete when you put a book out in a different state, different city every night?
A little bit. This one is a little bit more trying than most because I just got off a week-long fly fishing trip in the Sea of Cortez, where it was 100 degrees every day. It caught a lot of fish, but I was not immersing myself in the details of the tour. So I was on the plane today reading over the itinerary thinking, damn, this is really long. What? Where am I going? Geez. So I'm usually more prepared.
Well, Ryan, we got to bring you up here to do some on the ground, feet on the ground research.
Yeah.
We have.
You don't know it yet, but I'm coming to stay with you. We're gonna go hang out and look around Montana together.
Oh, for sure, that'll be a lot of fun. We have a ranch that we manage that's about 40,000 acres. So, and it's right around, literally. That was the funniest part about reading your book, is it's like we have it's in the same area. I won't say where it is, but it's literally on the other side of the crazy mountains where your book takes place.
Well, I did my first book signing Saturday at a Barnes and Noble, and a lady came in and was reading about it, and she goes, "Oh, so how are you in Michigan? Do you live out like in the country? Are you on a farm somewhere?" And I'm like, "Nope, I live in the city. I'm from here." And I think that kind of surprised her, but I would love to get out there because there's something and I'm a city boy to my core. Like I would be dead very quick if someone left me out like in the wilderness. Like I would not last long at all. But I definitely feel that pull, out west, and there's just something about it, and there's nothing quite like it, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. We'd love to have you. And I know I personally blame Chuck for all the tourism that's been coming to Montana in the last couple of years since the TV show has taken off. I don't know.
And I would like to, I know you guys were talking about that a little bit when I came on board. I thought Ryan did a really good job. I'm very, very stickler about things that are set in the Mountain West that I find many times inauthentic. And that bugs me a lot. And I thought Ryan did a great job with the sense of place in Montana. I can't think of a single false note, where I thought, oh, I wish you would have sent this to me beforehand, kind of thing. I thought he nailed it. So that's a big deal.
It is a big deal. And I think he really did one thing that I can't remember what town you were talking about, Ryan, in the book. Just getting the locals down. And it was just like, oh, wow. It really seemed like you went to kind of those bars, or you're talking to some biker, or you're talking to some cowboy. I mean, you really did a great job on that. So, kudos to you. That's not
Thank
easy.
you. I mean, in some regard, every town has those bars, and I felt like there were certain things I knew without being there. And then again, relying on a lot of people who did. When I first started to write this, all I knew was I wanted a Jason Bourne-like character out west. That's what I knew. And when I gave it to my agent, I remember him saying, "Why don't you just pick Wyoming?" And I'm like, "Well, because CJ Box writes about Wyoming. I'm definitely not doing that." And I thought about Colorado, I played around with Utah, and there's just something about Montana. And even when you just look at my screensaver is a shot of Montana. And I put it, the book's based in Stillwater County, but I fictionalized the town because I wanted one that really kind of fit exactly what I was looking for. And there wasn't exactly, so that gave me a little bit of flexibility. But I mean, I really did try hard with that. And I mean, we have places like that here. You know, there's country-ish parts of Michigan out in the middle of nowhere, you know, and those bars, like we all have those. And I think those atmospheres are mostly the same around the country, no matter where you're at, to some degree.
Yeah. And, you know, my books, part of them always take place in Montana, just because I like to use Montana as a character. You know, like when I was a little kid, you know, even 20 years ago, you could drive with a loaded gun in your car or your truck with an open beer, and there's no speed limits on the highways. You know, that's what it was like until, I mean, maybe 12 years ago in some places. So, but if you go out even right now into very rural Montana, you know, it's Wyoming's the same way. I mean, it's just, there's nothing out there, and it's its own place.
And I think that's why it works so well. You know, there's only 2 series that I've read more times than I can count, and it's Vince Flynn's and it's Chuck's. And I could never write Vince Flynn books. I don't think I have that in me. I don't even really want to. And I actually got my first bad review online because someone was like, couldn't finish it, thought it was a spy thriller. And I was like, wow, do you mean the cover and the details on the back kind of said it was in, but that's okay. You know, it happens. But I knew I wanted to, you know, explore that area. And there's something to be said about the fact that they're so alone. Like, I didn't even know what a game warden was until forever long ago. I read the first Joe Pickett book. And there's something about when he gets into trouble, he's in trouble and he's on his own. Well, until Nate gets there, he's on his own. And there's something about that I kept thinking to myself, why don't we see Jason Bourne out there? Why don't we see James Bond out there? Why don't we see these characters out there? Because it really fits that lone wolf, tough guy persona. Like when you're out there, there's always that whole, you know, I am 911 around here, but out there that's real, you know. And when I had a medical emergency with one of my kids one time, I called 911. It took less than 3 minutes for the ambulance to get here. I can't tell you how many times writing Fields of Fire I thought, what if that happened to Matthew Red? And in book 2, that becomes an actual scenario for him. And there's just something so different about being out there where backup is not minutes, but hours or days away that really fits these characters and what they're doing. And it just made all the sense in the world to me that, like, why don't I put the series out there? In fact, when we talked to a lot of other publishers, I was shocked too, by the way. Several of them were like, so you're going to move out of Montana, right? You're not going to keep the series there? And I was almost like kind of brokenhearted, like, oh, they don't get it. And the first call with Tyndale, there were 2 things in particular that I understood that they understood right away. They got it. They were like, so this whole thing's going to be set in Montana. And I was like, that's my plan. And there's another character that I thought was central to Red. It's his high school sweetheart, almost like his moral compass, you know. And that's my relationship with my wife. And I like to say, Red looks to her for guidance in that same way, that pivotal scene in the movie 300, where Gerard Butler, King Leonidas, is about to kick the guy down the endless well. And before he does, he looks at his wife and she gives the nod. And I like to think that that's Red and, you know, his love interest. But we talked to another publisher that I thought I might sign with at one point, and they were like, so you're going to kill her off, right? And I was like, whoa, no. Like, I was so taken aback by that. Like, they didn't get it, that it was when I talked to Tyndale and they really understood. I felt like this is the right place for me, and Montana was the right place for Red.
Yep. That's a good quote right there.
Yeah. You should use that. What else? It's funny because I read the book now almost 6 months ago.
You know how hard it is for me to be on the other end? I feel like I should be asking you guys all the questions, by the way. It's really hard. Like, I've had to turn that off. I was on Jack Carr's podcast, and like halfway through, you can see I just start asking him questions the whole time.
Oh, really?
And then I realized, so I was like, oh, I'm supposed to be the one being interviewed.
No, that's funny. I mean, yeah, I mean, I was actually just very blown away by how you just nailed it. Because it's hard to do, man. It is really hard to do.
Thank you. I tried to walk that line.
Chuck, you got any questions? I'll think of one.
No, I can't think of any questions I have. I'm glad to hear there's another one on the way. You know, the second one, I think in my experience, is often the hardest.
Yeah.
So hopefully you feel good about that.
I feel like I shouldn't be saying this because we want people to read Fields of Fire, but I think book 2 is so much better. And I think it's because the characters are established, the setting is, and you get to see Matthew Red unleashed. This guy is 6'3.5", 265 pounds of muscle. It was a lot of fun to take the leash off. And he's in a position where his family's threatened and he doesn't take kindly to that. And probably goes too far with the lone wolf tactics, but I'm really psyched about book 2. For me, I didn't outline Fields of Fire. I don't know what your guys' process is like. I just sat and wrote it. So I told my agent, this is a good, so you said what I learned through the publishing experience. Yeah. Here's one for you, Connor. So I told my agent, I was like, I'm not going to do an outline. He's like, well, they really want you to submit one. And I said, well, I'm not gonna, but I'll turn the book in. And he goes, you have a payment tied to that. And I was like, so I'm going to write an outline and I'm going to turn that in. So I found that out. But it was very loose. It was like 2 pages of notes. And I thought they're never going to like ever approve this. And they did. And they had a lot of faith and trust in me. I didn't get book 2 approved until last October. So I wrote October, November, December, and then part of January. I edited January. I turned it in February 1st. It was due June 1st. So I turned it in early because it just flew out of me, man. I had it in my head. It was a story I knew I wanted to tell. And I found it a lot easier to write. But there were times along the way, we'd do the publishing meetings and they'd go, hey, this is great. We can't wait to see how you get Maddie out of this situation. And I think, me too. Me too. I gotta go figure that out. And there were things along the way I didn't know how they'd feel. And I'd ask for a Zoom call and I'd pitch my editor like, so you think this could happen? And she'd be like, oh, absolutely. I'm like, oh, great. I'm going to go do that, you know? And so I learned very quickly because I've been an editor and I've helped a lot of writers to lean on my editor. And I found book 2 really enjoyable to, you know, that saying you have your whole life for your first book, you have 1 year to write your second one. And I knew that going into it. So but I'm very visual. I have to see that story in my head or I can't write it.
Same.
If I don't see that chapter, I cannot sit down to write if I don't know what chapter I'm writing. I just sit and stare at the screen. But if I know and I think it through, so I like to write at night. I can't write during the morning or the day because I kind of feel like I haven't enough time to let it play in my head enough. So I like to write at night. Plus, all my kids are in bed at that point, so it makes it a lot easier. But I'll let that play in my head all day, and it's like I just take it a chapter at a time. And so book 2 for me was really easy. I'm writing book 3 right now. Not the case at all. I went so big. I was like 20 pages in. I was like, I'm stuck already. Like I'm.
Yeah, I mean, for me, book 2 is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It felt like writing book 1 was very easy compared to book 2. All the pressure and it was just so. You said that when we did the Montana Book Festival, it's the first time we met. Mm-hmm. And I'd never heard such an honest answer. I asked you about that and you were like, so hard, you know, and no one had ever been that honest before. And you were like, remember it was Greg Hurwitz who was telling you got to write like 6 to 8 hours a day and you always have to stay. And you didn't know a lot at the time that I was slogging through Fields of Fire. And I was like, man, I feel the same way. And, but listen, if my second book is half as good as Wolf Trap, like I'm going to feel pretty darn good about it. And, thank you. Chuck, what your second book was it was Savage Road?
Savage Run.
Yeah. Savage Run. Yeah.
Exploding Cows.
Yeah, that's right. And it was fairly easy because I had written in a different form before I ever wrote Open Season.
Really?
So I just went and stole all the ideas from an unpublished manuscript and went with it. So I wasn't starting fresh. The third book was more difficult because I didn't have material to mine yet. But since then it goes, you know, been going fairly well, fairly easy. I've never been stuck.
Mhm. Yeah, I was going to
So-
ask, does it get harder as you're, 20 books in to come up with ideas, or it just kind of comes naturally?
It hasn't yet.
Okay.
Not to say it may not, but because I always include current events and because the families in the books are so important and they get older every time, it kind of just, it's a fresh start every time in a way. They're not just murder mysteries, so they're about things, and I write about things I'm really interested in, and I love to do the research on those things. It's my favorite part of the process.
Yeah. I mean, it was funny. A couple months ago, I in my parents' old bookshelves, I found an arc, or it was a galley. It was just like, it was a Winter Kill, your book
Oh, really?
from like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And you wrote something to my dad. Yeah, you wrote something to my dad about, I don't know, both. I can't remember what you wrote. I have it downstairs, but it's like it's literally just like a piece of paper. It says Winter Kill on it, and then the manuscript within it. So I thought that was pretty cool.
You want to hear something crazy, Connor? I read that book every first snowfall. Every first snowfall here, I read that book. The first Nate book, first Nate Romanowski, I read it every single year. And I'll tell you something else that was funny. When I set out to read Fields of Fire, I told my agent it's gonna be Vince Flynn meets CJ Box. And I remember there was this long sigh, and he goes, "What's that look like?" And I was like, "I'm trying to find out." And when I was writing book 2,
but guys, I think I need to call Patrick up because he's going to have to leave. Patrick, come and join us and see if there are any questions for all three of them.
Oh, there he is.
Sure thing. Hey, Ryan, do you want to finish that thought?
well, when I was writing book 2, I realized that Red needed that sidekick role that the heroes often need, and I realized he didn't need a Nate Romanowski because he is the Nate Romanowski.
Right.
And so I wrote my real life best friend, Mikey Durhammer, into the book, but I didn't tell my publisher it was based on a real person. And so I completely down to the way he looks, mannerisms and all that. And the first feedback I got on Lethal Range when I turned it in was, "We love this new character, this Mikey. You fleshed him out so well. And like, you did a great job creating out." And so like, I was afraid to tell him it was based on a real person because, they praised it so much. But yeah, I wrote my real best friend in, who's more of the Joe Pickett like character as opposed to the Nate.
Cool. I think that was a good move.
Yeah,
I hope so.
What's
Cool.
Mikey's last name again?
Durhammer.
That's a great name, Mikey.
That is.
Yeah. I have a couple of questions from our audience. Troy would like to know, has there been any Hollywood news about Fields of Fire yet?
I also want to know.
Yeah, so I signed with the biggest talent agency in Hollywood a couple weeks ago. It really shocked me because I didn't know they were reading Fields of Fire. So when I found, I literally thought it was a joke that they were interested. And turns out it was real. And when they wanted me to sign with them, they called my literary agent. And when I signed, I said, "So you think this will go out soon?" And they're like, "We're gonna take it out after lunch today." And I was like, "Oh, wow, that's quick." And so they've been pitching it to, like, I definitely can't say who, but some real A-list actors who are considering it for lead and producer credits on it. And then they got it to some directors and some screenwriters that are really impressive. Like, I've been really blown away with that. So there's a lot of talks going on right now that feels really surreal to me, but I'm excited about it.
How about you, Connor?
Yes. I don't know if I can say it live, but yes, I do have a very big thing coming. So
Wow.
Nice.
Good. Congrats.
Here we
Congrats
are,
to both of you.
Big congrats, man.
We're giants, aren't we? Good heavens, Patrick.
yeah.
Let's see here. Mark would like to know, how long did it take to write Fields of Fire?
Well, about 6 years, because I kept putting it off. I was so busy as a book spy, as an editor. There was no rush for me. The first draft of Fields of Fire dealt with human trafficking, and my agent was like, "No one wants to read that, so you need to take that out." And that sounded easy at the time. The way he said it was like, "Just take that out and put something else in there." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I can do that." No, that was like a full rewrite. Once I sat down and figured You can't just replace that with something like on its own. Like you've got to write around that. That's not an easy thing. So about 6 years for me, which was why I was pretty nervous when I signed that book deal. Well, like Connor, you signed like a 2-book deal and you're like, they're going to want me to write another book. And that reality hits you. I didn't have like that fun moment where it's like, oh my gosh, I signed the deal or I got the first payment. That's nice. In the back of my mind, it was always like, I sure hope I can write a second book. And thankfully was able to.
Yeah, I basically allowed myself to have 24 hours of happiness. And then I went, oh no, I have to now do this in a year. And then I picked, the plot for Wolf Trap, which was a very big plot, and suffered for a year writing that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Barbara, is Chuck still there or did he drift off?
He went to get some water. I know that you need to leave to get yourself set up for this evening's event with Chuck. So
Really
is there anything
soon.
else?
Let's see here. There's somebody named Jeremy. I'm not sure if you know Jeremy, Ryan. Some of these questions seem like you might. It says, for Ryan, is it true you're adding an additional character for book 3 named Jace to help Mikey and Red?
No. No, so he's a good friend of mine. I launched, I'm probably the only thriller author on a platform called Twitch, and have got to know a lot of my early readers and people that love thrillers and bonded with them through that. And so he's on every night. I chat with him every night. I thought his name was Jace. His name is Jeremy. So I literally renamed a human for the first time in my life, and everyone calls him Jace now. So that's been a lot of fun.
That's cool. A quick question for you, although I'm sure Chuck, although I'm sure we'll talk about it tonight, but Chuck and I always nerd out about Western history material and books, and the whole Anaconda mine and all that fascinating labor history and Red Harvest. There's so much that's
good.
set.
Yeah, good references there. Yeah.
There's so much that's set. Butte, Montana's fairly close by. Were there any good nonfiction books that kind of helped you when you were writing this, or did you really need any?
I had the opportunity to work for the state of Montana, promoting tourism to Montana for 24 years. Oh, wow. And half my relatives they're all over the state. So I feel very, very comfortable in Montana and writing about Montana because I've spent half my life there. And I wanted to write about the 2 places that I think are the least Montana as they're perceived by people out there in the whole state. And that was Butte and Anaconda. Because they're just different from any place else. Wouldn't you agree, Connor? I mean, there's no other place like Butte or Anaconda. Yeah. And so I didn't have to do a lot of, I read the history books, and I read a lot of Montana history about that area, read a lot more about the labor movement starting. The entire country was started in Montana.
Yeah.
And
did Walter write a book about that?
He did. Yeah, Jess Walter did also. Yeah. So I wanted to incorporate those things, but not overdo it. But it's a fascinating part because it's just like Wyoming. Everybody has a certain view of the state, and it usually has to do with cowboys and horses and elk, and and you really dig deep in it. There's some really fascinating history, especially in that part of the world. And the fact that everybody who lives there in Butte, they always say they never say I'm from Butte, Montana. They say I'm from Butte, America. So that's a thing. And they just have a different outlook.
Yeah, Butte during St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah,
it's wild.
Oh my God.
I've never. Yeah.
I'm glad you made it out alive.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just, we don't have to get into it, but yeah, that's nuts. But yeah.
Barbara, I think we're good.
All right. Well, then I want to thank everybody very much. If I sneak in here with Chuck, let me just say that we do still have some copies of Fields of Fire, some signed copies. Brian was kind enough to do that. And well, obviously we have Treasure State. We have that one. Connor, we sold all of yours, so that's why I'm not holding it up.
That's a good thing.
Good thing.
It was actually one of our most popular debuts when he wrote it. It was July
of
of 2021, right, Connor? It wasn't this past July, it was a year ago, right?
Correct. Yep.
So anyway, but we can get more copies when Connor comes down to sign Wolf, what's it called?
Trap.
Wolf
Wolf
Trap.
Trap. Yep.
Okay, on March 14th or thereabouts. So it'll all be very exciting.
And I'd like to give some unsolicited advice to the two younger authors here. Get to know this lady and do every single thing she says, and
We know.
everything will go well.
And I forgot to say that Chuck will be back at the Poison Pen to kick off the next Joe Pickett on Monday, February 26th, I think it is. Anyway, it's the Monday of the last week in February. I'm almost sure it's the 26th. So we already are taking orders for it. What's it called?
The next one, it's called Stormwatch.
Okay, so Stormwatch is already
Another winter book, Ryan.
I know. I've been reading about it. I'm psyched.
So if you're watching Joe Pickett on Paramount, you'll be even more interested in ordering copies because Winterkill is part of the one going on. Right?
It is. It is.
And Nate Romanowski is a really interesting character. Is he the Nate Romanowski you envisioned?
He is personified, and the actor playing him has gotten really into falconry.
Oh, good.
Personally
Awesome.
and professionally, and I think that's cool. That's
It really is. Right. So there's lots to look forward to, everybody. But meantime, thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. Goodbye.
Good luck, you guys. See you, Ryan.
Thank you so much, Chuck. Barbara, thank you for having us.
It was really a pleasure.
Yeah,
I'm
thank
so
you.
glad everybody could make it. And anyway, enjoy your evening.
Thank